Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast. In a world that's constantly racing, around here we believe the most powerful way forward is to slow down, listen, and move with intention. I'm your host, Kendra Chapman, mom of triplets, former school principal, and someone who has lovingly embraced the rhythm of country living. Each week, we delve into the balance of mind, body, and spirit, and how we can align our lives with what truly matters. So whether you're tuning in for the first time or you're a longtime listener, this episode is your invitation to reflect, realign, and start making steps towards your purpose. Let's explore the art of slowing down to uncover clarity, connection, and calling together. My guest today is a coach with a master's in counseling psychology, a background as a licensed professional counselor, and certifications in EFT, tapping, heart math, and women-centered coaching, who brings over 11 years of experience in energy healing, stress management, and mindfulness. Tammy helps highly sensitive female entrepreneurs move from overwhelm and imbalance into confidence, peace, and personal power so they can fully be themselves and navigate life with greater clarity and mindfulness. So refresh your cup of whatever beverage you're enjoying and settle in, and let's get started. Tammy, thank you for agreeing to come on the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast and sitting down with us today. How are you doing?
Very, very well, and you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. For our viewers and listeners out there, I'd like to ask my guests before we get started, just to kind of share a little bit about how you go slow to go fast in your daily practice.
I like that question because it's one of the things that I work with all of my clients on, which is just ways to calm the nervous system. And I learned many years ago, like in college, I got migraines, self-inflicted, if you will, because of stress and, always doing too much, too much, too much. I learned to slow down in many ways. The majority of them I've continued through the years. And the main one that really helps me is committing to daily meditation. And sometimes like it means only 5 minutes, but I try, I go for 15 to 20 minutes. And then if I have time to do more later, great. But just I found at one point, being a highly sensitive person, feeling like kind of on edge or, amped up a lot of the time. Once I started committing to consistent, like every single day meditation at one point, and as things go like that, when they go away, you don't realize, well, when did that happen? But at some point I realized, oh, you know what? I'm not as reactive as I used to be. And overall, I just feel a lot more calm. And I didn't know that that was necessarily going to be an effect of that and when that happened, but that's my main go-to. And then just reminding myself there's always something more to do. And if I expect myself to do everything all the time or my whole list by the end of the day, I'm pretty much guaranteed to feel overwhelmed or like I don't have enough energy, just deplete myself. So learning to prioritize and just say, I'll do what I can do and whatever's left is left and that moves forward to the next day and that's okay. So those are kind of the two primary ones for me for being able to just say, okay, yeah, just slow it down because we can go, go, go and not have that room to breathe. And sometimes it's just stopping and remembering to breathe for, 30 seconds. I mean, we breathe all day long, of course, but being, aware and consciously breathing and just slowing it way down and focusing on the breath rather than what's going on up here. Just, I'm going to pay attention to the breath coming in and the breath going out. Okay, I do that for 30 seconds and it's a nice little reset that I can do anytime, as many times as I want throughout the day. And then I can do it longer if I'm really feeling amped up. Like, oh, let's do that for a couple minutes. Just focus on that breath. So those are the main things for me.
Thank you for sharing, because I think it's just so helpful for everybody out there just to hear how different people process and incorporate what might be a simple strategy at face value at that surface level, but it can be so hard to be consistent sometimes, especially certain times of the year. Like when we're doing this interview, it's the holidays in the United States. We're in between Thanksgiving, what we know of as our holiday, Thanksgiving, and then one holiday if you celebrate, and then going into the winter Could be the winter solstice, it could be Kwanzaa, it could be Christmas, it could be if you're Jewish, you're celebrating, so many different things. So we have a lot going on in our lives.
I do. Yeah, and
Yeah.
even the end of the year kind of feeling like, "What have I accomplished? What's left by the end of the year? I have to get this done." So all of that stuff combined with, yeah, what you just said, it can be
Yeah.
a lot of people just don't even take time to stop once they're awake. They're checking their emails, they're immediately jumping into everything, and then they lay down at night and they're still, "What didn't I get to? What do I have to do tomorrow?" And then starting all over again. So, yeah, it can be that on that little hamster wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Just your mind is in your thoughts. You're just constantly going. Yeah. And I mean, that is unfortunately, I think, at least in the United States, it's just how many Americans live their life. And I think we're just having to be very intentional to get off that hamster wheel, like you say, and really just be, you know, careful about how we live our day.
Yes. And we have so many expectations in our culture, especially. I mean, I can't talk to others because I've never lived anywhere else, but there seems to be that, that expectation that doing more is best, and the most you can cram in, the better person you are, or the better you are at your job, or the better parent, or whatever. Just cram as much in as possible, as humanly possible, not realizing or acknowledging the effect that has, on our nervous system, on our health. I mean, our healthcare system is just overburdened, overwhelmed, because so many people have so much going on medically these days, and a lot of that is related to stress. And it's not that we have to get rid of stressors, that we can find some way to live with nothing that stresses us out at all. But we have to learn how to manage all of those stressors, or all the things that are going on, and in a way that allows us to be calm and then healthy. And then we can do all the things that we want to do better, of course. I mean, as you know that. But yeah, that expectation in our society is just like, if you take a moment, you're being selfish, or you're weak, or you're, incompetent, or whatever, fill in the blank for all those things that you must be if you take some time for yourself. And I mean, I think we've made some progress because there's so much focus now on wellness, and there's retreat centers everywhere and all that. But I think it still kind of has that little edge of, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? That's still a selfish thing, rather than, oh, that's really important to do. So then you can do all the other stuff.
Yes. And that's partly why I started this podcast. Part for me, because I need this constant reminder that it's okay to slow down. It's okay to be intentional about what you want and don't want in your life. And just to learn from experts about ways to make, you know, changes in my life, but also, like you said, just really being conscious about slowing down. And in this culture that we've created ourselves, just thinking about ways to basically just almost like break it down and rebuild it in a different way is really, where I'm going with this podcast. And I'm hoping it's helpful for others. But, thinking about a highly sensitive person and how, one would go through life day to day, especially in a rat race culture like we live in. Talk to us a little bit about how it impacts daily life, being a highly sensitive individual, and what that looks like for you, because I think others out there may not even realize that's, how they're presenting in the world and they just never knew.
Right. And, one of the things that's very common is for us to assume that everyone has everything, experiences everything exactly the same way. And so if we have a challenge with it, there must be something wrong with us, that we can't manage that. We can't tolerate, or whatever. But sensitives, highly sensitive people, we're wired completely differently. So we do process things differently. So it makes sense, if we understand that, this is my genetic composition, that if there's so much going on, I can only manage so much. And that's not because I'm wimpy or weak or whatever. It's because I take so much in, more than average, all the time. It's like being, like, if regular non-sensitive people, non-highly sensitive, are a sponge like this big, we're a sponge like this big. And all of the stuff is coming in all the time. We don't have all those filters that other people might. So when all of that is just this big barrage all day long, and we're not weeding that stuff out as well because of the way we're wired, then we're going to get overwhelmed sooner. I mean, it just makes sense if we look at it that way, but it's easy for people to say, what is my deal? Why everyone else seems to be managing, which of course is not always the truth, but what we see. And then we do know people that are like, what is the problem? Just let that go. Or why is this a problem? And we're like, I don't know why. And then we find out like, because I'm wired that way and I'm taking in so much more than everybody else. And so it's easy to go through life saying, wow, I don't know why I have such a hard time. And it seems like nobody else is. And I got to get myself figured out. I've got to get this solved versus saying, oh, okay, so I need to create my environment, my experiences in a way that I can manage because I take all of this stuff in. So, first, I have to manage me, which means acknowledging that I'm this huge sponge and I get saturated so much more quickly. So, I need to do those things to calm down to start with. If you think about it, like our nervous system is, amped up way higher than average to start with. So when you put even more in, I mean, how are you going to manage that? So we have to do things to start from a lower baseline anyway. So all of those self-care practices, and like you said, making that sustainable, not just once in a while I do yoga and, oh yeah, once this week I meditated, but things that are really consistent and become part of your daily plan, your existence. Really, after a while, you realize, oh gosh, I didn't get my meditation today, and I can feel that. I can really tell, and acknowledging that those are the things that are necessary for us the way we're wired to be able to manage. So going through life can be very challenging if we're not aware of being sensitive or what that means, or not orchestrating things in a way that allows us to manage everything. And so it can be very confusing, or we can feel really bad about ourselves just by comparing to other people that seem to just let things roll off their backs. They just seem to have it all together and we're struggling. And those things they're just part of our daily experience. And I know, going way back from school, I got a master's in counseling and I started as a counselor and I worked with survivors of abuse of all different varieties. And I had no idea about sensitivity at that time. It wasn't even talked about in my psychology program. So I wasn't aware. I mean, if I thought about myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm super sensitive, but I didn't know that was trait and what that all involved. So I didn't really create my lifestyle and my thinking, my intentional plan for work when I went into that, and I got really, really burned out to where I just couldn't even do it anymore. And looking back, I was able to say, "Oh, well, that makes sense now." Before, when I stopped, I'm like, I don't know what my problem is. I spent all this money, all this time in school, and I'm really good at it, and like suddenly I can't do it. And then, recognizing, looking back, like, oh, of course, it makes perfect sense because I didn't do these things and I needed this to be in place. And I had to really look at even, if that topic, if you will, that theme of abuse and trauma, if I could manage that beyond a certain amount of time. So being able to look forward and say, okay, how can I manage my life in a way that a sensitive person requires and can thrive in, and see that as, oh, like if I were to do that with somebody else, oh, how can I help you in the best way? Oh, you're left-handed. Let me get you a different pair of scissors or move you over to this side of the table. Or you're hard of hearing. Let me, offer these different things that will help you, to thrive. And the same thing that anybody that has, that's neurodiverse in any way at all. I mean, not just sensitives, but it's just part of who we are, and we require some different things. So if we look at it that way as, what do I need to thrive? Okay. And for me, that's, a pretty quiet environment with not a lot going on. If I'm trying to focus, different, I mean, even, physical sensitivities that I a long time ago learned to just be like, yeah, that's just the way I am. Okay. I'm not going to wear that, or I'm not going to have this around me. I, regulate my temperature, all of those things. And then the people that I have around me and where I would choose to be, and the energies and, all of that stuff, I can say this works and this doesn't, and be okay with that. And then that allows me to go through life being who I am without having to change, because one of the most common things I hear is like, can you just make me not sensitive? And which makes me sad because there's so many great things about it. But we do have to have the right tools and the right mindset and plan for what helps us thrive. And then we can.
Would you say that there's a specific set of tools that practitioners use to identify if somebody is a highly sensitive person? In your profession, is there like a certain baseline or a certain diagnostic that most
Yeah,
would
there's
gravitate towards?
there's a lot of research now, and so there are multiple inventories online. So if you just go in and type in, highly sensitive inventory, whatever, there's a bunch that probably will pop up. The person who created the term and did all the initial research is Elaine Aaron, and her website is hsperson.com. And she has the very first one ever created. And then there's a whole bunch that have come with all the new research and such. So there's inventories that you can kind of take, and you just answer the questions, is this me? Is this me? And then you look at how many you have when you're done, and it kind of generally tells you, oh, if you're in this range, then it's likely that you would be considered a sensitive person. We do have different brain tomography. So if people have a brain scan, you would notice differences, but of course that's not an average thing to do. So we're not gonna be like, I'm gonna have a brain scan to see if I'm highly sensitive. But it does show that we do have those actual inherent differences. But in terms of just kind of there's not really a true diagnosis per se. It's not a mental disorder or anything like that. But those inventories can be helpful to just help to identify. But another thing about them is that they're really, really great tools for helping other people understand us. So the way that I learned that I was highly sensitive, someone actually was helping me through a struggle with my business partner at the time and another friend, and said, "Oh, you should check this thing out online." And it was the 16 traits of highly sensitive people, which thus to my look, I couldn't find that particular one anymore. But I said, okay, I'll look at that. And I'm like, that's me, that's me, that's me. Like 14 out of the 16. I was like, whoa, what is this highly sensitive thing? And of course, that makes sense. Well, I know I've always been really sensitive. We usually hear the words too or, so sensitive, but yeah, very sensitive. So not only was it really, reaffirming for me and supportive for me to say, oh, it's not just me. There's an inventory online, and now there's so many of them, and all this research. So that's really supportive that way to say, yeah, okay, there's a reason for all this. It's not me. And when you see all those specific things written out, you realize so many things that you hadn't recognized before that are related to the sensitivity piece. Oh, that's why I do this. That's why this happens. That's why when this person says blah, 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 that this is how I react. Okay. So it's not me being a drama queen, or it's not all of these things that we tend to hear. But then it's also really good to use. We can print that off or email it to somebody and say, hey, would you take a look at this? This is what I did with my business partner. I said, would you just look through this thing and let me know when you've read that? She said, yeah. And she was like, okay. So, and I said, so I answered yes to all but two of those things. And she was like, what? And so then that was a way of conversing about, this is me. It's different than you. But when these things happen, this is why. And it was a whole, opening of, oh, okay, now I can see you, in difference to myself, but also all the things that bug me about you, or the things that I think you shouldn't do, or I don't understand. Okay, now I can see those differently. And that can be very, very powerful in any kind of relationship, of course, to have that, to know that that person is seeing you and hearing you and understanding you. And then having that moment to say, okay, there's a reason for some of these. Let's work this out, instead of just expecting the person to just change everything. Just take care of that and come back when you're when you're not sensitive anymore.
Right. No, that's a good point. It's good. It's good to know that there are multiple inventories out there for people to do a little deep dive, because, that's another reason why I wanted to provide this podcast and many practitioners as guests, because, we want to make it accessible, this wellness journey that we're all on, accessible to people if they don't have the means to, get the counseling right away or do the research or do as much, on their own. They can at least,
And with
explore.
Counseling and coaching, it's good to know too. There are a lot of people that are not aware of sensitivity at all.
Mm.
So finding someone who at least understands and has the awareness, whether they are sensitive or not themselves. But that's one of the things that I hear from people all the time. It's like, wow, I could only get so far in counseling or coaching, whatever, because I just didn't feel really heard. And the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that would come up, I'd be like, well, that doesn't make sense for me. And so being with someone who gets it, who
Mm-hmm.
understands it and actually lives it, is a whole different experience and allows them to go much further. So that's one thing just to be aware of, when you're saying, okay, what resources are out there? Maybe I do want to talk to somebody. Just being aware that if sensitivity is obviously it's a big part of your life. That's who you are. But if you think that is a part of like what you're running into with whatever you're struggling with, then it's good to know that, there are a lot of people out there that are at least educated in it, if not also sensitive. And so it'll be a different experience that way than
Mhm.
just having someone say, well, you just need to do this, or okay, let's figure out how you can just not worry about that anymore. And go from a place of understanding.
Yeah. And a little bit ago, you mentioned that, there are people that might be thinking, I just need to ignore this part of me if that's what you see in yourself. But really, you can transform this sensitivity into a superpower
Absolutely.
if you have the tools to do so. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the first step is really being aware of who we are as sensitives, what parts of us are maybe different than others because of that sensitivity, and then recognizing those that are helpful, not just, it's easy to know, well, yeah, I have a hard time in big groups or in noisy places, or I've got, I have to take all the tags out of my shirts because it itches, and I have, all these things. You're going, okay, well, that's kind of annoying. Maybe I don't want to have this sensitivity thing. But then when we look at things like noticing, one of the things is that we sense the subtleties of life. So noticing the little ladybug on the leaf when you're on your hike, or the nuances in a piece of music, or something that others are just not aware of. You say something like, "Oh my gosh," you're ready to cry looking at the sunset, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, that's nice," and they move on to something else, and you're going, "But it's amazing." You have just these different experiences in life because of the sensitivity. With the sensitivity, recognizing all of those things they're just, again, like you were talking about, you don't realize that it's different than somebody else. That's part of your life, so you don't recognize that not everyone else experiences those things, and things that help you be a good leader, and your compassion and ability to understand people and know what they want, and all those things. That's not average. Not everyone has those skills, at least, to that level. So being able to recognize where all of those things are actually benefiting you. And then when you have those identified, then going forward and saying, okay, how am I going to actually really use that? How can I hone that part of me, these skills, after identifying, like, what are those things that are working really well for me, or that I'm really good at? And then making a point to use those more. So that is part of your superpower. And whether that's really connecting with your intuition, or recognizing, if you're in the helping field and you recognize what other people need, go with your gut and say, I do actually know this. I mean, I can really pick this up. It's not just me being like, oh, I've got this idea, but I don't know where it comes from. No, there's a reason, and I'm going to go with that. Really allowing those pieces of you to shine and become that superpower, and not downplay anything be in comparison with somebody else. We tend to do a lot of that comparing, more so than average. People who are leaders. I mean, I had a client a couple years ago who, that was her main focus, was like, I'm in this leadership role. I've been here 2 years. I keep getting promoted. I keep getting all of these accolades. I have no idea why, because I'm not a leader. Because she was comparing herself to, well, what does a leader mean? And she'd, make this big list, and a lot of her traits were not on there. And said, okay, so what makes you a good leader? Or what is it that people are acknowledging about you? What would other people say about you that you're doing? And then, created that list and said, okay, so those are rather different. Does that mean that this one is not effective? No, in fact, it might be more effective, because there's that level of compassion and understanding what the team needs, not just the one person, all of those things. So really recognizing and honoring those, and then using those, is really powerful.
So the flip side would be managing that overwhelm.
Yes.
So, do you have any strategies, guidance for those who are highly sensitive to protect themselves?
Yeah, so there's so many avenues for that. There's so many different ways to go. One is, again, that nervous system piece, and having that something consistent, so that your nervous system level, your baseline, can be lowered, so that there's more room for more on an average day. So part of that is just that ongoing sustainable practice of whatever those things are that resonate, that help you calm that system to a different baseline, so that you can manage everything. So as an ongoing resource, that's really important. And then there are ways to, again, become aware of what's normal, typical for a highly sensitive, and recognizing that we're wired that way, acknowledging what those things are, and then doing some searching, like, what do I respond best with? What does get in my way? And really having that awareness in a curiosity, helpful, moving forward way, rather than like, oh, what's not okay about me that I need to downplay or push away or whatever, but just say, oh, what are the things that I know about myself that get in the way or that are helpful or whatever, and then creating a plan based on that. A lot of it is really lifestyle and scheduling, learning how to prioritize and let go of that need to do it all the time for everyone, especially, and being able to slow down and say, okay, I can do this much in a day. How do I want to do that? Making breaks, having time to breathe. Every hour I stop and do a little breathing. Okay, then I drop my nervous system down a notch, and then I can go forward and do more. So there's things like that. A lot of mindset stuff, just looking at what am I telling myself and being able to shift that into the new reality. And then there are a lot of tools for, energy movement. I mean, energy practitioners, I do that as well. A lot of different, Reiki, and I mean, any of that kind of like, I'm going to go see an energy practitioner. That type of acupuncture, those kinds of things can be really helpful. But there's also tools for energy release that, you can learn for yourself. There's EFT tapping, which I do, that helps to really uncover a lot of that, like programming. I mean, we're born this way, sensitive. So our whole life, we're getting that programming of too much, not enough, can't do this, need to be different in all these ways. And so we have that programming in there that can be looked at and said, oh, let's shift that. So EFT is really good for that. Yeah, so many different tools, and it depends on what resonates for everybody. I love meditation. Some people are like, don't make me go there. And there are other things, you can do some yoga and Tai Chi and breathing exercises and not do meditation. But that's a whole nother subject, because a lot of people think meditation needs to be a certain way. And if it's not, then they're not good at it, and that's not for them. And then they do a simple thing and they're like, oh, it's meditation. That works, So it just means looking at what works for an individual person. But there's so many tools for ongoing, managing the scheduling, and then boundaries. That's a whole other topic too. The whole boundary thing, being able to say no, which is part of that, not doing everything by the end of the day, moving things forward, but also invitations, things that you want to do. Sometimes we have to say no to dinner with a friend or something that sounds really great, but it's like, well, there's going to be too many people there and my energy is already really up right now, and I need to pass on that, because I know if I check in with myself, I know that I'm not up for that right now. So, being able to set those boundaries and just expectations of other people and our own expectations. So a whole variety of different tools for sure.
Yes, I agree with everything you've said. And there are so many modalities. There's so many ways that one could tap in to what might work for them. But it is trial and error. You have to try a lot of things before you find something. Or maybe the first thing you try is going to work. But, now I've tried EFT. And then I've come back to it. I've done yoga and then I've come back to it. So it doesn't mean if you've tried it, didn't work the first time, you just abandon and never try it again. Maybe try something again and see if it works for you now. But like you said, your schedule, if you can own your schedule and own your calendar and feel empowered by saying no, that I think is like half the battle for the sensitives out there.
And I'll throw this little blip out there this is from Elaine Aron with all of her research. If everything was as we want it and it was ideal for the average highly sensitive person, she said what is recommended would be 2 hours a day and an entire day per week of downtime for sensitives. So if we think about just how much that is, and that's just to regroup, to recharge, to let things go, to calm that nervous system. And so that would be ideal based on her research. So if we were talking about our crazy culture and everything, who can do that? 2 hours a day and a whole day over the weekend, or, during the week sometime. You look at it and go, what, are you crazy? How's anybody going to do that? But if we think that is the ultimate, the optimum level, how close can we get to it? Recognizing that, so if I expect myself to take a half hour out a day, maybe that's really not unreasonable. Maybe if 2 hours would be the goal, then maybe, okay, maybe I'm not asking so much if I set aside 30 minutes. Yeah. So I think that's just something to keep in mind up there is like, well, if I was really taking care of myself, ultimately the way that would be the best for my genetic makeup It would be 2 hours a day of be going, okay, bye, I'm doing my thing. Don't talk to me. I'm in this room or I'm out on the trail or whatever every single day. And yeah, typically people can't do that. I mean, even people who are retired, they don't seem to have that much time either. It's a lot of time. So yeah, if we just say that, that would be the ultimate goal. So how much can I do? How close can I get to that? And recognize that it's not selfish. It's required to calm ourselves before we can manage everything.
Right. And I have not taken an an inventory, but I have a hunch that I am an intuitive, highly sensitive person. And I think, I'm eager to take one of the inventories just to see if that aligns with my thinking. But I have had the opportunity to step away from my 27 years, almost nearly 30 years in education, where I had people in my space, my personal space, all the time, all day long, and 10 hours at least, being in school settings. And now I have really set aside, I'm working in the home, and I really have carved out 3 hours a day for interfacing with other people besides my family. And the rest of the time is in deep thought, and I'm writing and I'm thinking, but I'm still doing work. But it's different, that energy is different when you're not interacting with others. I even have to get up and move around and go outside and make myself, because I will stay on the computer screen all day long if I don't have a schedule that maps out time to get up, time to move. You need to go drink water. You need to go do something different. So yeah, I think we're just wired in our culture. Like, we're wired one way if we're a sensitive person, but then we're also just feeling like we have to give into this culture. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no like, okay, you get to this point and you're highly sensitive and everyone's the same, just highly sensitive. There's a range also within sensitivity and different things that, like I'm extremely sensitive, physically. And I have sensitive friends who are like, oh, yeah, I can wear, whatever. I can't even wear like baby alpaca on my neck. It's like nothing animal. I just can't do it. And other people are like, oh, it's so soft. Like, yeah, I know it feels soft on my hands and that's about it. And then there are certain things that they bother me, but very manageable. And then some others that I know are like, oh, that's my one thing, So, I mean, there's all range of experiences of sensitivity. And then there are other things like high sensation seeking sensitives who are really they're going to go do the bungee jumping and they're going to, we're going to do really seeking out lots of, traveling and all of these kinds of things that are great experiences, but we really have to manage that nervous system to make that work. And then not all sensitives are introverts. Some are extroverted. And so, all of these things factor in. So it's not a just cut and dried, oh, if you're sensitive, then you have to do all of these things. And this is what it's like for you. There's a whole range. So yeah, it'd be interesting if you take the inventory and say, yeah, okay, so maybe all of these, but these few things over here, yeah, not so much. But somebody else who's sensitive might be like, those are my big things. That's the top 5. But you're both sensitive. It's a wide variety of experiences that we have. But when we do have that level of extra, sensory experience, then overall our life is different. We see things, we process things differently. And it's all about processing, we process things more deeply. Again, it's like having that sponge, we pull it all in, we're paying attention to everything. Everything has meaning, big meaning, which is like the sunset. Like, oh my gosh, but that was so amazing because it's just like has so much meaning, and for other people, like, whatever. But it's easy to sit back and go, geez, I can't let anything go. Everything, I notice everything. Everything has meaning. I mean, we don't necessarily say that when we're talking to people, but it's like all these things seem so important and people want me to just let it go and I can't. And that's, again, just because we're wired that way and we process everything so deeply and we just don't weed stuff out in the same way. But within that, it would be different, one person to the next.
So in your research and personal experience, have you found that highly sensitive people may be more prone to trauma or internalizing trauma experiences?
The experiences that are traumatic does not only happen to sensitives. And if someone is sensitive, it does not mean because they've had trauma. Those who are sensitive are prone to having much deeper reactions and experiences of that trauma than someone who's not sensitive. Because again, of all the meaning that we give to everything, of taking everything into a deeper level, it's going to have a much stronger impact. And then all of the programming, all of the things that we think about the trauma, about being sensitive, all those things are going to exacerbate everything to a much higher level. So it can be much more challenging dealing with that. It can be much more long lasting, all of that kind of stuff because of the sensitivity piece of just, again, sucking that all in and what we're telling ourselves about it. It's not okay. I'm not okay. Not that anybody with trauma wouldn't experience some of that, but the level is completely different because of that sensitivity piece. So not, trauma doesn't happen only to or because someone is sensitive, but that experience is usually much, much deeper. And then there does tend to be more, I think, connection with that mindset of those thoughts, beliefs that it's because of me that this happened versus I was in the wrong place at the wrong time or, that kind of stuff. I think it's more likely for it to be taken personally and really much more deeply. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't have any groups going right now, but there are still a few, I think, on Meetup in different places, and usually they allow people to come in if they're not full. I ran one for a while, and it's a little challenging to do things on Meetup and keep them going, and so I don't have that going at the moment. But it is really powerful to first know that it's not just you, and then to talk with other people that you know that you don't have to explain yourself to at that level. I mean, everyone's different. And you say, "Oh, this is me," and you share stuff, but you don't have to explain what your experiences are like as much because they're also sensitive. The main one that I know of right now is Julie Bjelland, BJELLAND, has a whole platform with a sensitive community, and that's really, really powerful for people you can join it you can go there and read some blog posts and see some things that are free, and then you can join, for a low monthly subscription type thing, and then you can post, and there's tons of resources in there, and her blog is, global, and there's a lot of different trainings, workshops, that kind of stuff on there, people. So there are some resources specifically if you know of a man who's sensitive, important later. There's some stuff out there. It's building, and there's the highly sensitive refuge sensitivities. And then there's a lot of books out there. Elaine Aron has a bunch of books, and there's a lot of other ones, and those can be helpful. That's not so much for connecting with other people, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
good resources.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'll make sure all of that's in the show notes. If you share anything additional with me, I'll include that. So if anybody is interested in working with you, how can they find you and your information?
Yeah, they can just go to my website, which is just Coach Tammy Goen, so TammyGoen.com. And then, I've got a couple little ebook things on there and ways to connect with me, all the information, what is high sensitivity and ways to work with me. And then if you go to Linktree, people are familiar with that. They can just by my name, Tammy Goen. I don't do a whole lot of social media these days. I'm on LinkedIn, so I can be found there as well. But most everything is Linktree or on my website. And I do have a YouTube channel as well. And on there, there's EFT tapping, there's meditation, there's a whole series of sensitivity podcasts, TV shows. So there's a bunch of stuff on my YouTube. I think just, for anyone who is sensitive, just do your research, get as much information as you can to the point where you can say, okay, I accept that I'm a sensitive for a reason. And actually, they recognize that it's not just genetic, but it's an evolutionary type thing. If you think of the quail always has the sentry that's like looking around for everything, right? The animal community always has an extra sensitive, at least one who's out looking out for everybody. We have sensitivity for a reason, and it's not wrong. It doesn't need to be changed, because I think that's the biggest thing, having without that awareness and acknowledgement, spending all of your time thinking there's something wrong with me that I need to change. I need to fix myself. And so just acknowledging you do not need to be fixed. You just need to understand yourself better, understand you and help you and get that support that you need. And then create that game plan that works for you with that awareness, but letting go of that piece that you need to change and that you're not okay as you are, because you have the superpower.
Yeah. And if you're on a spiritual path of any sort, then, like me, I'm thinking that we're here for a reason. Anybody out there who's highly sensitive, just to support us to the next level and make sure that
Yes,
everybody's being heard.
absolutely. And actually just being part of that raising of humanity's vibration, right?
Hmm.
I mean, we're really in tune with energy and frequency and vibration. That is part of why we're here. And so we're helping in that next step by helping others raise their vibration. Even if we don't know we're doing it,
Yeah.
in a way we're still helping. But when we realize that, we're like, oh, okay, so I can let my energy rise up and let myself shine so that I am contributing even more to that flow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And this might be another podcast episode, but with all the solar flares that are happening recently, I think there's another one happening this week. It's going to be something that's going to be felt in our energetic
Hmm.
field. And
Right.
some are going to feel it more than others.
Yeah. And that's one little aside too, is just recognizing sometimes we have intuitive hits and we don't understand. We're like, I don't know why I think this, but I'm going to go with this, or I think I'm not supposed to do this. There's that kind of stuff. But sometimes we also have things where we're like, something feels really off today, or gosh, I feel more on edge and there's no changes, no particular reason. I don't know what that is. Just acknowledging that sometimes that does happen. And it's because of that. We're either picking up individuals around us or whatever, their energies, or we can be picking up the planetary cosmic stuff or a solar flare. I mean, something that's happening energetically. I mean, I've recently realized I've actually connected with the frequency of the earth more, and sometimes I can actually hear it. And, at first I'm like, whoa, what is going on? What is this thing in me? Until I realized it's being more connected and it's not a bad thing. So,
Right.
so yeah, I think that's actually part of our human evolution, is to become more aware, more sensitive, more connected. And so we definitely can help with that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. And again, anybody out there listening or watching, if you want to work with Tammy, you can check out her information in the show notes and find out more. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode of the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. And I'm just so happy that you're here, whether you are, again, a first-time listener or you are returning to the show. I just want to say thank you for being here. And this month I have a little over 700 downloads, which is exciting for me because I've only been doing this podcast for a little over a year. And I was excited to get 12 downloads when I first started. And I hope that it continues to grow, because that just means that more people are listening and sharing and hopefully returning because they like the content that we're putting together over here on the Go Slow to Go Fast podcast. And with your feedback, it's just going to help the show get even better. So thank you. And thank you for joining us today for this conversation, because I'm hoping that it resonated with you as much as it did with me, and that you take a moment to kind of reflect on your energy and hop on over to her website to find out ways to start living with more purpose in your soul path and what you're meant to do here on earth. And hopefully you'll see some alignment, but you might also learn something new. Thank you for being here, for doing the work, and for choosing to live with intention. The light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.